Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April of 75. Hardly a man alive who remembers that famous day and year. By Henry Wadsworth, 1860. Paul Revere had an adventurous life, filled with famous horse rides, war, and family drama. Paul Revere's childhood was filled with adventure, too. On December 21, 1734, a brand new American baby was born. His parents named him Paul Revere. His parents didn't know it, but Paul would one day be a famous man. Paul spent most of his childhood growing up in Boston. During this time, Boston was very busy, being one of the most important cities in the American colonies. In Boston, there was many shipping businesses and lots of craftspeople. His mother was a lovely woman named Deborah Hitchborn Revere. His father was a silversmith named Apollos Revere. Apollos came to the Americas as a Frenchman, and later changed his name to Paul Revere. In Paul's teens, Paul became a silversmith apprentice for his dad. Paul was later known for his silver etchings. When Paul was 19, his dad died, devastating the family. Paul was given the silversmith shop. In Paul's 20s, the French and Indian War began, and he decided that he would volunteer to fight for the war. A year later, he married Sarah Orr and had 8 children, which would prove to be a handful because the children often died at a young age. In 1773, Sarah died, and Paul decided that he needed another wife. He married Rachel Walker and had another 8 children, proving once again to be a handful. A couple of years later, the colonies were starting to get sick of the British. When the colonists started getting trigger-happy, Paul stepped in to help. Paul was known to be in secret war clubs like the Freemasons and the Sons of Liberty. These groups were very popular in the war. People often joined them just to get back at the British. In the days after the Boston Tea Party, Paul delivered the news to everyone in the surrounding areas. In later time, he became the most important messenger in the decade. On April 18, 1775, his most famous ride happened. Paul was around 40 at the time, riding a borrowed horse named Brown Beauty. On his famous ride, he was working for the Committees of Correspondence as an express rider to carry news. On April 18, 1775, Paul was on a mission to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock that the British troops were on their way to arrest them. On his way to Samuel and John, he had to cross a river, so 2 associates helped him row a tiny boat across the river. After he crossed the river, he borrowed Brown Beauty from a friend. When he was in Charleston gathering his horse, he was told that the Sons of Liberty had lit the lanterns for the other towns to see that the British were coming. On the way to Lexington, Paul tried to warn everyone that the British were coming. Revere was being very loud at the time and yelling all over the place, but when he reached John's house, John started yelling at Paul to be quiet. Of course, Paul meant no harm when trying to tell that the British were coming, but being woke up in the middle of the night isn't the best thing. A little bit later, another person joined him, warning people that the British were coming. The band who joined him said that they should change course and head for Concord to warn the secret militias. On their way to Concord, another man joined, and they headed off. Soon after the 3 got together, they were found by a British patrol and were arrested. Paul and the other 2 men were taken back to the British fort and were questioned. The British couldn't get Paul and the others to break, so they had to let them go. When Paul was in jail, militia and Minutemen formed to fight off the Brits. If Paul hadn't warned all the people that he did, the Brits would have found all the secret weapons, and we probably would have lost the war. Paul Revere's ride was very important, and without it, the USA would still be connected to Britain. Through all history to the last, in the hour of peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed, and the midnight message of Paul Revere.